Are you a private music teacher, or maybe you're just a musician who wants to get into teaching? My name's Chelsea. I am a mindset coach for musicians and a flute teacher. So I teach private flute lessons, but I also coach musicians on their mindset, on performance anxiety, imposter syndrome, different things like that. My whole mission is empowering musicians. So today I want to tell you about a coaching tool that I learned in my coach training that I use all the time in my teaching. So as music teachers, we're not really taught how to teach one-on-one lessons. People just assume, oh, if you can play really well, you can teach it. That's not always the case. So I want to give you some tools to maybe improve the quality of your lessons, both for yourself and for your students. This concept is called holding space for your students. And in coach training, we learned this because we never want to have an agenda, meaning I never want to claim to know what's best for my clients when I'm a coach. I can't know that. I can't know what is best. I also can't believe all the stories my client is telling me as though I'm a friend to them. Of course, I am forever their cheerleader. I believe in them unconditionally, and I will help them achieve their goals. But if I believe everything they say like I'm their best friend, I can't offer different perspectives. And I think that holding this space, holding this neutral space for a student to just be themselves and to witness them, not judge them, for what they're experiencing as you suggest concepts, as you suggest different exercises. I think it's a really important space to create in private lessons, both to gain trust with the student and to give them a chance and to give yourself space to look at your own thinking, how you're approaching the lesson with each student, and have a better experience yourself. Now, I want you to think about the student that you think like never practices, right? This happens so often where a teacher will come into a lesson and they'll be like, the student never practices. And then they come in with that energy. What we want to do is clear that up beforehand. So before a lesson starts, maybe 2 minutes, I want you to write down all your preconceived notions of the student. Oh, they're not going to be able to play their chromatic scale again. Oh, they are always late. They don't come in on time. They always dilly-dally. They always want to talk about something else. They never want to get to work. Any of the judgment thoughts that you're having. And then I want you to acknowledge you're having those thoughts, become very aware of them, and how they're making you feel and the energy that you're then bringing into the lesson. I think this is so important because the students can feel it. If you are expecting them to not have practiced, they can feel that. Even if they do, then they feel like there's kind of no point in trying because like it didn't create a different result for me. So I'm just going to go back to not practicing because that lesson also felt bad, right? We want to think about it from the student's point of view, and we want to give them a chance every single week to show up as their best, and we want to hold space for that. That's the first way that I really think about not having an agenda, not having preconceived notions of my students, and trying my best, because we're all human, trying my best to hold space for them and let them grow and show me what they've done that week. And then also accepting like, hey, and this is my own philosophy, if you didn't want to practice, we can talk through it. We can talk through your motivations, where flute is in your life, how it fits in, and then go from there. See, like, do you want to improve? How much do you want to improve? If all you have is an hour a week to dedicate to flute and that's with me, that's important for me to know as a teacher, because then I'm not expecting, an hour of practice every day from that student. I'm expecting we're just kind of learning together, and I will give you tools and strategies to take outside of here if you have time. And let's talk about how it can fit into your schedule. Then also use this for a space of experimentation. I love holding space and creating a container within the lesson of say, hey, can we experiment with your sound for a little while? Meaning we're not changing things permanently. We're just trying on concepts. We're like styling, right, with these concepts and different things that we can approach the instrument with. So if I have a student who's working on sound, I'll take a passage. Maybe it's an exercise they're working on. I'll say, okay, let's experiment for a second. Can you try opening your mouth this wide? Or can you try making this vowel shape? Or can you try creating space in your body in this way? And we experiment. We try different things, see what sticks. And the benefit to that is the student is engaged in saying like, I wonder how that did change the sound. Instead of me saying, you do this because this. And it's always important to, of course, explain why you're suggesting those things so they have a context and a knowledge. But I think it's so crucial to say, let's just experiment. Let's see what happens. And then ask them, what did you think? Did you hear that? Did you notice this? Like, what did you notice? And I always ask them that and give them the space to have realizations, because if they can't hear their improvement, they're going to be much less motivated and excited to take this work outside of their lesson. When they get excited to reproduce the cool new sounds they're making outside their lesson, there's nothing better than that. That's like everything to me when a student realizes that like their sound is improving or their technique's improved and they kind of surprise themselves. That is always where I want my students to be. And to do that, we need to hold space for them to have opinions. We need to hold space and listen and be curious and not just tell them stuff, not just give them advice. As teachers, I think of us as much more as guides. Of course, we need to guide more specifically when students are younger, but especially older students, we want to help them cultivate their own opinions of their playing so they can feel really confident no matter what situation they're in and no matter if their teacher's there or not. If we just feed them info and we don't tell them why, and we're just like, do this and this, and then they just do that, and then they come to their lesson to see if they're doing it right, then they don't cultivate their own opinions, and then they really get stuck because they don't have confidence in their own approach. They don't have tools. They just have an ability to do what you, the teacher, are saying. And then they constantly need a teacher. That way, and in that way, practicing at home becomes a lot harder. So holding space is so important as teachers. I think that whenever we can hold space for students to have a full human experience in their lessons, not just a session with their instrument and an instructor telling them what to do, it is so much more rewarding, and you can see the growth of a student so much more quickly. So I want to throw in one more thing here, because as a coach, I always know that I don't know what's best for my students. Even my 10-year-old students that I teach, I can't know what works best. I'll try a game with them and they'll hate it. Then I'll try playing by ear with them and they're so into it. And I can never really know what student's gonna like what and who's gonna jive with what until I create that space and get curious about my own student. And so then I'll offer different tools, different ways of practicing and looking at things, but always reinforcing that I believe that they can get it unconditionally. They will be able to do this, and kind of instilling on purpose and saying to them those words. Of course you're going to be able to do this. Absolutely 100%, you're going to have no problem. And I think that when we don't say that, or we prime our students' brain and say, oh, yeah, this is a really hard one, you're going to have to practice a lot, that's not necessarily going to be as fruitful because they're already thinking it's going to be really hard. So think about how you talk about each and everything you assign and really wonder, okay, how can I adapt my teaching and the space I'm holding for this student to be safe enough for them to tell me that they don't like something, for them to tell me that they're not jiving with something, and to check in with the student. Like, hey, I'm noticing that maybe you're not practicing as much as you usually do. Is everything okay? Like, it's totally fine. And I totally get that you have like 8 subjects in school and you have ballet and piano lessons too. So I'm just curious if something else is going on in your life, and like let them be a whole human. And they actually really love talking about other things. They love talking about how busy they are. And then you can maybe incorporate, oh, you remember you were saying this thing about your cello lesson. This is how we could do that on flute. Right? So you're using different parts of their life, letting them be a whole human, and then incorporating that into the lesson. These are things I think are so important as we hold space for our students. So if you would like more tips and different things that I have learned as a coach with humans, with dealing with big emotions especially, I'm going to be sharing more tips on this channel about teaching, about private music teaching and coaching as I have learned them and incorporated both of them together. If you don't want to miss any more tips and you're interested in mindset and music, please subscribe and you won't miss a video. And if you want to check out the first video in this series, which is all about the thought model and how I use it to understand my students' mentalities, mindsets, motivation, you can check that out here, and I will see you next time.